I'm going to talk to you today about the importance of reputation counsel. Why is it important to have someone counsel you on your reputation? Well, it's very easy. If you have a good reputation, it gives you the license to operate. A license to operate increases your optionalities. So as a company, if you have a very good reputation, it just gives you room to maneuver, and your room expands with good reputation. In our networked societies, our networked world, it is so important that people understand what you stand for, who you are, what your values are as a company and as a person. And I would say the only thing that you need to remember if you're thinking about reputation and reputation counsel is just three things: I, you, and we. Let's talk about the I. So the I is either the company or the CEO or the person whose reputation is at stake, or the person who is talking to someone or is engaging with society and stakeholders. I want to tell you a little story to emphasize why reputation counsel is important. When I was working in the US, this is many, many years ago, this may be around 20 years ago or so, there was a CEO of an investment bank, and he was very successful, and we were having a meeting. I was having a meeting in his premises, and you have to imagine that this investment bank had a really amazing headquarters, very close to Central Park. When you walked in, you had marble floors, and you had 3 stories that were open so you could see, and from the top of the ceiling, very, very high, you had this huge chandelier hanging down. So this was their entry of this investment bank. And I was having a meeting with a few communicators in that building and in those offices. And at the end of our meeting, we wanted to take a group picture. So we said the best place to take a group picture would be, in that lavish entryway, the hallway. And as we were lining up to stand for our picture, the CEO walked past, and he stopped to have a chat with me, and he said, "Sabia, do you know, recently I had a picture taken of me for my alma mater, and I wanted to emphasize to them that I had climbed the heights of success. Can you guess how I had my picture taken?" And I said to him, "Let me think, you probably sat at your desk, and because his office was also quite lavish, with a view of the New York skyline and so on. So I said, you probably sat at your desk and, had the skyline behind you." And he said, no. Let me give you a hint. I'm a climber. So I then thought, okay, I get it. You probably put on your climbing gear and, were climbing a boulder and had your picture taken to symbolize that you've climbed the height of success. And he said to me, "You're almost there." And he pointed up. And I looked up and I saw the chandelier. And then I thought to myself, he's joking, but I said, "Wait a minute. Are you saying you put on your climbing gear and you hung yourself from this chandelier?" And he said, "Exactly. I hung myself from this chandelier in my climbing gear to show that I had climbed the heights of success." And you can imagine that I was horrified to hear that, because it just showed me how much he had lost touch with the real world. He was basically making a fool of himself by posing, hanging from his chandelier. Reputation counsel can be so important because it builds a bridge between your stakeholders and yourself. And sometimes, whether you're a CEO or in a leadership position, or you're working for a startup, you can be so enclosed in your own world that you forget what is important and how the outside world works and what the topics are there. So I'm telling that story because it's such a crass example of how you can lose touch with reality without good reputation counsel, without somebody who helps you build bridges to your stakeholders. So that's the I. So why is it important that the I has reputation counsel? Well, if you think about it, a CEO doesn't just represent his or her own values, but actually represents an office. And it's something that's really difficult sometimes to understand or to walk in that path. Because the CEO is a person and has his own personal interests and values, but then he represents the company, or she represents the company that she works for and the company values. And actually, there's not much difference between your public persona and your personal persona. It needs to be consistent. And I think Reputation Council can help you to combine your personal values and your company values and build a bridge between the two of them, so you don't feel as if when you're representing an office that you're walking in someone else's shoes, but it's you. So how do you actually merge your personal values with the office that you will be representing? And I think that's something that anybody in leadership position needs to think about. You know, you need to think about, if you are representing a country, you know, the country has certain values. You might have your own values, but now you're representing something that is larger than you. And Reputation Council can help point to that larger than you space that you need to embrace and walk into. So, you know, if you have a CEO that's very analytical, that is great. It's a great quality to have. And how can you build on that to, for example, make that person maybe more empathetic, maybe talk a little bit more about emotions and things that move you. And I think that's why Reputation Council comes in, to make sure that there is no discrepancy between the personal self and the corporate self or the office. So the second thing you need to remember about good Reputation Council is the you. And the you represents the stakeholders. Now, that used to be very easy who the stakeholders are 10 years ago. You think about your customers, your employees, your investors, you think about regulators. In the last 10 to 15 years, you've had to add the societies we operate in. You've had some surprising stakeholders, like our children, if you think about Greta Thunberg, for example. If you think about her, who would have thought that a 16-year-old girl would become such an important stakeholder and the figurehead of a movement? So if you think about stakeholders today, the you, the people you are talking to, it's important to remember two things: that they want to be treated as humans and as adults. And what that means is that if you are having a conversation or a dialogue, that dialogue needs to be on eye level, at eye level. And oftentimes what I observe is in discourse that there is no dialogue on eye level. It comes either from a position of superiority where you want to win an argument, when you want to put someone down. It's more an arm wrestling often than a conversation. And I think what this world and companies also need badly is a conversation that is constructive, where you listen to listen and not to answer. And I think when you think about the you, it's critically important to think, no matter where your stakeholders are and who they are, and they could be very surprising stakeholders, they all want to be treated as humans and as adults. And if you keep that in mind, whether you are a person in leadership or a corporation, you will get a lot of goodwill. You will increase your license to operate because your stakeholders, your you, feels that they're being listened to and engaged with, not because you want to win an argument or you want to be right, but because you want to solve an issue that they have alerted you to, or because you want to understand what are their needs, how do they need to engage with you, what are the important things. I think if you don't understand the you, if you don't treat them as human and adult, there is no way that you can expand your license to operate. Another important aspect of the you, your stakeholders, is that there will always be trade-offs when you are communicating with your stakeholders. You cannot please everybody. And an important aspect in reputation counseling is making people aware, or companies or leadership, of the trade-offs that you face. And it's important to face them head on, because transparency about where you stand is respected. It's also respected if you disagree, even with some stakeholder groups. But I think honesty and transparency and taking a stand is more important than pleasing everybody, because in this complex world you will not be able to please everybody. So I think when you think about you and Reputation Council, you have to remember that you'll have to manage trade-offs. You need to understand what they are and also still maintain your position, because you won't be able to please everybody. So the final thing you need to remember is the we. And the we stands for community. And I think over the past 15 years, your communications community has become so important. And that community includes the I, the you, and something more, and something else. So I think if you think about social media, every person can create their own community. Not just their friends, but they might be interested in research, or they might be interested in certain trends, and they might engage with people in a discussion. And I think managing that community today is also an important aspect of Reputation Council. In communication today, you have so many analytical tools available. You can actually look through data and find out where the communities are that you want to engage with. Who is talking about certain trends? Who's talking about climate change these days in social media? Who's talking about certain healthcare challenges? And you can go there and participate in the conversation. Why is the we so important? Because the we is actually that entity, that big group that is going to solve some of the key problems of this world. If you think about climate change, for example, it's too large of a problem to be solved by even one people group or one company or even one nation. It needs a collective effort. And I think in order to prosper this world and solve some of the issues of the world, the we is important. It's your community. It's how you move forward on big topics. So let me give you an example for a we. Allianz recently initiated a UN-convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. So you are asking, what is this? This is a joint effort by 30 institutional investors who committed to making their portfolios net zero emissions by 2050. So this is a very large task, but we're in this together with others. And what it shows is that some of the issues that we are facing as an industry and as a world are so large that they can't be tackled by one institution or one person even, or even a movement. And this Asset Owner Alliance aims to have conversations with clients in order to transition the real economy to a net zero world. And we have a long way to go, but it's an ambitious start. And it's an example of how communities today are going to solve problems. And if you think back about Reputation Council increases your room to navigate, it increases the room to maneuver. But for what? It increases your room to maneuver and your trust to make this world a better place. And that's why it's so important to have Reputation Council.
Thank you so much, Sabia, for that presentation. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you. So the first question is, why is Reputation Council so important in this day and age?
So Reputation Council these days is incredibly important because a company's value is 90% intangible assets. And of those 90%, a huge chunk is the company's reputation. And if you think about the reputation of a company, a good reputation gives you the license to operate. It expands the room that you have as a company to maneuver. You build trust with society through communicating with them. And why wouldn't you want counsel on such an important aspect to the value of your company?
My next question is, the storytelling style has changed over the years. In fact, we don't even communicate with our audience the way we did, 10 years back. So how do you suggest, how do you communicate or, take your message to the you or the we that you had mentioned in your presentation in the present scenario?
Storytelling has changed, but storytelling itself is more important than ever before. Because in a complex world, storytelling is what helps us make meaning of things. So I would say storytelling is still essential, but the way we tell stories has changed completely. There used to be an oral tradition with stories being passed from one generation to the next. that has become a visual tradition, if you will. There's a lot more video communication of storytelling, and stories have become completely mobile. So stories travel the world in seconds if you think about how viral videos are shared among generations. So there's an opportunity to tell stories globally now, and you can listen and engage with a story anytime, anywhere. And the engagement is important because you used to just listen to a story in previous times. Today, actually, you can engage with a story, you can comment, you can add your own story, you can build that story. And for cultural transformation in companies, storytelling is essential. You need to know where you came from to build the future.
My next question would be, how do you think Reputation Council has changed for new age companies? When I say new age companies, I meant from small startups to the new age brands which have come up over the last 5 or 7 years, like WeWork, Uber, Tesla, and so on and so forth.
So I think when it comes to new age companies, what I would say in Reputation Council is that these companies need to understand they operate in a larger context. So any company that is new and dynamic, if you think about the big tech giants, needs to know that with big influence, which they have, comes big responsibility. And this means that they need to just not just think about their employees, their customers, their shareholders. They need to think about the communities they operate in and the influence they will have. So if you think about Allianz, we are also thinking, how can we contribute to solving the big issues that this world is facing, one of them being climate change. So it's essential, I think, in Reputation Council to think about what am I as a company contributing to solving the bigger problems of this world. The other thing I think that new tech companies know and that I would tell them is you have so many more tools available to communicate. You can analyze data and you can tailor your message to people who want to hear it at the right time in the right way. And the question I would ask is that a good thing if you perpetuate that? Because is it good for me to build my own bubble of like-minded people, like-minded opinions? Where do I get the diverging views in? So my challenge in Reputation Council would be you grow stronger as a company by allowing divergent views in. And my question to a lot of the tech companies would be, how are you doing that? How are you making sure that societies are healthy? Because societies are healthy if there are constructive arguments and divergent opinions being exchanged, and not if everybody is allowed to create their own bubble.
My next question is a two-part question. So you would have heard about Tesla dissolving its PR division, right? So in an absence of a reputation management team, how do you foresee the future of the brand? That's one. And do you see other brands following suit?
So I don't want to comment on what Tesla did. I don't know what the motivation behind that is. I tell you, in an ideal world, no company would need a communications department or Reputation Council. And why do I say that? Because I think that, in the future, 10 years or maybe 20 years down the road, ideally, every CEO and all leadership would have the interests of all stakeholders at heart, of all stakeholders and at society. So it doesn't need the in-between man or woman to build bridges, which is still necessary today. And I think communicating will become an essential task of everybody's job, and reputation will become a task for everybody. So that's an ideal scenario. In the real world, there's of course so many different tasks that leadership has that I think it is good to have a department that has good relationships, that keeps an eye on trends, that represents the interests of the stakeholder in the sense that it's listening to societies, is listening to customers, is listening to employees, and it's their main job. So while very, very ideally, if there were no time limits on how long a CEO or leadership can work, and if they had all of the stakeholders' view in mind, it wouldn't need a department like that. But having said that, I think it's very important that there is an emphasis on building bridges to stakeholders, and that's best done by a department that focuses on it and focuses on the needs and keeps the dialogue going. If the reputation department or the communication department is made obsolete because the company doesn't want to engage with traditional media, I think that's a huge mistake. Because if you're not engaging with the media, you're allowing the media to tell the story that is your story, and you're not participating at all. So you're allowing somebody else. You've given up the, you've given up the influence over your own narrative to somebody else, and I would never do that. I would want to have a say in my own narrative, in the narrative of the company, and not leave it to third parties to write their own story without my participation. So it really depends on why Tesla did that. But in general, I think it's still necessary to have a reputation communication department that keeps the ties to the stakeholder groups really strong.
And finally, I wanted to ask is, how do you think Allianz is changing the way reputation, council is managed in the industry, or how is Allianz leading the way in terms of reputation council?
So I think it's a very tall order to say that Allianz would change the way reputation is managed in the industry. But what Allianz wants to do through communication is to win hearts and minds of its stakeholders. And when I say hearts and minds, we've been a company that is financially very strong. We're 130 years old, and we have technical excellence. We know all about insurance and asset management. And I think the part that we're going to build or are trying to build is the hard part, because we understand that you can't just appeal to the intellect of a person. You also have to appeal to the emotional side of people and show them the value that you bring to their lives. And I think that's how we want to shape the financial services industry, which is known for being technical, being strong in finances, being very strong analytically, and those all things are really good. But the part that has been missing, I think largely, is the people part. And people, after all, make up the company and make up our customers and make up all our stakeholders. So I think that's what we are focusing on.
Thank you so much, Sabia, for that very insightful and engaging talk. And I would also like to thank our audience who have taken the time out and have made this virtual session a success. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.